Hey, this is Kirk Walden, and welcome to Coffee with Kirk on the Pregnancy Help Podcast. And I think today our title is The Least of These, because you're about reaching the least of these. And it kind of came to me while I was watching a playback. I didn't get to see it, the original recording, or I didn't get to see it live, of the Dove Awards recently. Got a buddy up the street, and he happens to be the director he sets all the cameras, and he's the guy who sits in the truck and tells the cameras which shot to make and when to do that. It's really an interesting process, because he tells me that when he does an award show like the Dove Awards or the K-Love Fan Awards or something like that, what he does is he listens to the music that's going to be on the show, and he does this for weeks in advance, so that if there's, say, a violin solo, he knows when it's coming, so he can shoot to a camera that is watching that violinist at that time. It's really artwork, choreography, all these things that he does, and he's an incredibly humble guy. He doesn't tell you he does anything important, and yet he did the production for Billy Graham's funeral, for Charlie Kirk's funeral, for the inauguration. There's just this long list, and he's just, what a good guy. And so when he said, hey, would you watch this award show, the Dove Awards, I was like, yeah, I want to watch it. And so had it on record. And as they were going through, the song of the year this year was Hard Fought Hallelujah with Jelly Roll and Brandon Lake, or Brandon Lake and Jelly Roll, depending on who you like more. But I thought about that song, and I thought about Jelly Roll's story. And I wrote about this on a Substack post earlier this year about that song and how much it meant to me, because it's so fascinating that we had two people in that. Brandon Lake, probably, I think he grew up in church. I think he's the son of a pastor, and church has always been his thing, and writes great worship music. And you guys know his song Gratitude was the song of the year one year as well, worship song of the year with the K-Love Fan Awards. And yet he teams up with a guy like Jelly Roll. And Jelly Roll fascinates me. I don't know why. I don't know the guy. Interestingly enough, he only lives about 10 minutes from my house, and we drive by there to get barbecue. And he has not come out and said, Kirk, come on in, or anything like that. So I do not know him at all. All I know is he's got a lot of classic cars in his driveway, and it's pretty cool to drive by. That's all that I know about him. I also know he has a criminal record, because I have AI and I have Google and all that stuff. So that's all I know about him. So it's not like this guy's a friend, but he fascinates me because, if you look at him, you go, oh, this guy's done time, and he certainly has. This guy has a complicated past, and to say that is probably underwhelming right there. There's a lot more to it than that. But as I think about this guy, I think about the people we reach out to. I think about the struggles they bring into our offices. And I've watched some client stories in the last couple weeks, and I've just looked at them and go, these people they've had a lot going on that I know nothing about. I knew a dad growing up. I knew my mom growing up, of course. But I remember one guy telling me at an event that a guy came up to him or went to a young father in their fatherhood mentor program, was invited to his mentor's home for the mentor's son's birthday. And this kid walked in who's being mentored, and he looked around, and he spent some time with his mentor during this son's birthday party. And he looked at his mentor and said, I've never seen a family before. I thought, wow, that is to me almost unfathomable. And you've heard the stories and those things, and maybe one of you listening has had that experience as well. But here was a guy in his early 20s who's never known a family, never seen mom and dad together. More and more common, I know that, but it still just grips me when I hear something like that. How in the world do you become a great father when you've not known one? And it's fascinating, because I've got a friend of mine who started his own business and is doing quite well, but his story is not having a father at all. And he is a great father to his kids, and he's got a bunch of them, 6, 7, something like that, and they're just amazing, an amazing family. He didn't know a father, so it can be done, but I just think about the challenges that people face when they are, at times in their lives, not the least of these. And so I go back to watching this playback of the Dove Awards show. And I'm watching as they talk about the song of the year or worship song of the year. I think it was song of the year. And the winner, as I said, was Hard Fought Hallelujah with Brandon Lake and Jelly Roll. And I think about Jelly Roll. He walked up on the stage. Brandon Lake was the first to speak and said some wonderful things. And then he said, Jelly Roll, just take the microphone and you take the award. Because you treated me like a son and all this kind of stuff. And it was really a neat exchange between the two. And I think, wait a minute. I saw Brandon Lake is picking Jelly Roll for this song, and it may have been the other way. I don't know how it worked. But to hear Brandon Lake, who's probably been walking with Jesus since he was a kid, and then you've got Jelly Roll, who's just now trying to figure it out, and Brandon looking at Jelly Roll and saying, you treated me like your own son, and those kind of things. And I thought, this is an amazing dynamic going on here. And I went and I played it back to prepare for this podcast because Jelly Roll takes the mic, and I think his first name is Jason. I think that's right. But the first thing he says is, I'm not sure how much I even belong, even speaking up here right now. Just not sure I even belong, because he's looking at all these Christian artists who've been doing it for years and the glitterati, I guess, of Christian music and all that kind of stuff. And he said, I don't know if I even belong here. There's an incredible humility in that, and I really appreciate it. And I want to stop right here for a second. I know there's some people who have criticized Jelly Roll or something about his family or something that he shouldn't be doing, that he is doing. I have no idea about all that. I'm just going to be honest with you. I haven't even looked at that. I've simply seen him in venues like this, and I've seen him sing that song more than once with Brandon Lake, and I see a heart of humility, and I go, okay, if he has it all figured out, great. If he doesn't have it all figured out, that's great too. Not great, but he's getting there. And I want to think about that and go, hey, anybody who's on that journey, I want to support. And that's what Brandon Lake is doing, is he's supporting him. And I think that is an amazing thing. So first thing he says was, I'm not sure how much I belong even speaking up here right now. And I thought, give me that kind of humility. And then he says about how nervous he is. He says his palms are sweating. And then he said, I haven't been this nervous since I went to criminal court, y'all. I think, yeah, I bet not. Because when you're in criminal court, I don't know. I've seen some guys in criminal court. I remember I had a friend who made some mistakes, and he was in federal court, and I was there on his behalf to make the sentence hopefully a little bit more lenient because he had a family and he had some things going on. I think, and I was watching people getting sentenced to federal prison, and somebody turned to me and they said, that guy who just got 15 years, I don't know who it was, but it was before the case that I was there for, said there's no good behavior in federal prison. They say 15 years, you will be there 15 years. And I thought, I can't imagine how nervous you must be. And I don't know how nervous Jelly Roll was at this award show, but just the fact that he would say that, I think, man, he has been in criminal court. He has been. And then he goes to, in a moment, he goes to the least of these. He says, I'm standing here because people took time with the least of these. Just watching him, I did not believe that those were just words. I saw a guy who was overwhelmed with the situation that he was placed in by God with this song and with the people who surrounded him at some very tough times in his life. And he says openly in interviews that he had a road to Damascus moment. I don't know what that was exactly like, but a road to Damascus moment. And I think it was probably a lot harder for him. And I think about Saul of Tarsus and his road to Damascus moment. He was at the top of his game. He was a Jew among Jews, and he was out there. He was getting the letters to go persecute these Christians, and he was somebody who was moving up the ladder and had become famous in his work. And I'm sure all the Jews were patting him on the back and liking his Facebook posts and his Instagram posts, and he was probably doing TikTok videos of how great, all the stuff that he was doing as he persecuted these people because he was laying down the truth. And I think about Jelly Roll, and I think about where he was. Now, I think personally he was at a crisis moment, but professionally, this man was at the top. He was making money hand over fist, probably still is, but he had no reason, no earthly reason why he would need something besides what he had. He had the wealth he wanted, he had all the cars, and he had the notoriety, and he was somebody. And yet he had this road to Damascus moment. And the next thing you know, he's singing a song with one of the top Christian singers in the world. And he sees himself not as somebody who has a platform and let me go out there and do this new Jesus thing and see what happens, but he saw himself as the least of these. And at that award show, at the Dove Award show, he says, this world is hearing about Jesus like they haven't in decades. He said, folks, there is a revival going on. And I think he's right. I think a lot of things are happening. Maybe we're hearing about it more because social media has kind of opened doors for Christian voices that were shut down before. And I think our voices are getting out more because the algorithms are allowing it like they didn't years before. So I think that's kind of happening. But I keep seeing stories of people opening their Bibles that had never read it before. I'm following one person on X, and she's married and got a couple of kids, but she and her husband are exploring faith for the first time. And she was asking her followers, what kind of Bible should I get? And she was asking her followers, what kind of church and where should I go to church? And she's describing different churches she's going to because they're on a journey right now. And I think a lot of people are on journeys. And the more people see themselves, including us, as the least of these, the more effective our ministry is going to be. So as he wrapped up his thank yous, it was just a couple of minutes, but he says, go, do for the least of these. They've heard about Jesus. Now show them Jesus. And I thought, well, you know what? I have got hundreds and hundreds of friends in the pregnancy help community. Maybe if you're listening to this, you're one of my friends. Maybe you don't know me at all. And either way, that's great. I consider you a friend. Hey, if you're willing to listen to me for a few minutes on this podcast, I consider you a friend. But what you are doing each day is reaching out to the least of these. Some of them may be rich. I remember when I was a director, we had somebody come into our office, and she was a top-flight professional, looked like she had it all together, but her heart was breaking over her relationship with her husband and different things going on, and she felt like the least of these at that moment. Jelly Roll, as well known and all these things that he was, I'm just going to be honest with you, I did not know who he was until I watched him on the Nate Bargatze Christmas special last year. Now, I'd heard his name, but I didn't know one song that he sang. I didn't know who he was. But watching him on a Christmas special, so I'm not exactly a longtime fan. I just didn't know who he was. That's because I'm older and I'm a fossil to some, but I didn't know him. But I'm getting to know a little bit more as I watch him, and usually I see him in Christian venues. I don't follow his career very much, but he saw himself as the least of these, even though he had the notoriety. So anyone who comes in your door, the odds are that for one reason or another, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's because someone has been beating them down emotionally, maybe physically, or the fact that they're in a situation they had not planned on, they did not think about, and all of a sudden it has overwhelmed them. They believe at that moment, a lot of times, they are the least of these. And as you well know, and I well know, they will put on that mask that says everything is okay. But on the inside, they are the least of these. And I wish I could quote it directly and quote it well, but you know, when Jesus is talking about in the book of Matthew, when you visited me in prison, when you fed me when I was hungry, when you gave me water when I was thirsty, those sorts of things, anything you did for the least of these, you did unto me. And I'm just going to be honest, sometimes it's hard for me to really grasp that. It's easy to hear it and acknowledge it from a brain standpoint, but to truly grasp that in my heart is very difficult sometimes, because a lot of times you don't know who the least of these are. Well, I can guarantee you when a young lady, young man, young couple comes in your door, the odds are, as we just said, that that person believes, I am the least of these. And when you reach out to that person, you have no idea what might happen. And if I could say, I don't do trainings on how to approach clients or anything like that. That's not my area. There are some people who do this amazingly well. God hasn't given that to me, but I do know this. I do know our heart matters. And as we look at those who come in the door, I don't want us to look at them as the least of these, even though that's who they believe they are. I want us to think about them and go, okay, you never know when someone who once believed they were the least of these becomes someone who changes the culture around them because of a moment that they had. A road to Damascus moment that they had. They may look like they're on top of the world. They may look like they are under the carpet. But either way, when they believe they're the least of these, your opportunity is to see them as someone who could have a road to Damascus moment that could change everything, not only for them, but for others. Because I'll go back to the jelly roll analogy. He had his road to Damascus moment. All of a sudden, he had a platform, and he has used it, from what I can tell, pretty well. Somebody may tell me different and have discussions on that, and that's fine. But I see the good that he is doing, and that's where I choose to focus. And you never know. People who come into our offices probably have no platform. That's okay. Because the interesting thing is, every one of the least of these who has a moment where they are changed by the power of Jesus Christ, every one has a platform. We don't know the size of that platform. It could be 3 people in their home, and it could be people at work, and that's basically it. It may be the people that live around them in their apartment complex, or the people at the shelter that they come in contact with. But everybody has a platform. And in God's view and in how he does things, every platform is game-changing for somebody or somebody's, because you don't know if this person who comes in who believes they're the least of these, who has that moment in your office when they say, you know what, I'm going to start thinking about this faith thing. I've never thought about it before. Everybody's talking about it, but I don't know. But if that person sees faith in a new way and says, in whatever way they choose to do so, begins to follow Jesus, because I'm not about denominations or churches or any of that right now, because we're all united in this, and this is what makes our pregnancy help community so beautiful, is that we come from so many different backgrounds. But all of us ultimately want to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And we want to love our neighbor as ourselves. We all want to do that. I'm pretty much sure of that one. So whatever our background happens to be, and whatever the background of the person who comes in happens to be or happens to transform into, they do have a platform. May not be as big as jelly rolls, and that is fine, but they have a platform. And you never know what God is going to do with that. I think it was Philip who was just he was moved by God to a place to where he found an Ethiopian eunuch. One guy traveling, and the guy's reading from the Old Testament. Philip and he talk, and as Philip begins to talk to him about Jesus, this guy says, well, there's water. Well, Philip says, I'll baptize you. And he takes the gospel message back to Egypt, I believe, which takes the gospel to Africa. Don't know what his platform was, but all of a sudden the gospel went into a new continent because of one chance meeting. Who knows where the good news will go if we look at everybody who comes in our door. 1, as the least of these, but 2, as someone who, through the transformation that only a road to Damascus moment can bring, takes the good news to others that we never thought of. You are the good news in action. If you want to know what Christianity looks like, You can read the book of Acts. My pastor, we've just been going through that in our church. You can read the book of Acts and see what it looks like in action. But what you're going to see a lot of there is a lot of heartfelt conversations with people. And a lot of times when those who had the good news carried the good news with signs and wonders. And I'll tell you something, when they come into your office, it's easy to downplay this. If they see their child on that ultrasound screen, it's a sign and wonder to them. And you never know what might happen in your office that will transform them, that they see that they had no idea that God could do. So as you walk in, as you sit down in your office, as you welcome people in, you're serving the least of these. And I'm honored to stand with you in whatever way I can. But number two, you see the potential that the least of these, when they have that moment, could be, and I hesitate to say this, they could be the most of these. Because when God takes us and begins to transform our lives, things can happen beyond anything we can ask or imagine. So believe, keep believing, and keep reaching out to the least of these. It's what you do well. And you need to, as you pray, say, you know what, Father, help me see the least of these as you see them today. Because the Father, when he sees the least of these, he sees their amazing potential. When you do the same, things begin to change. Thanks for being with me on the podcast today. Look forward to talking to you next month. And if you have questions, as always, just get in touch. You can see how to do that in the show notes. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you and what you do.